everyone. You've seen the stats, and now we hope to make the case for why accelerating action will lead to place supporting small and growing businesses front and center of national policy. Successfully supporting these SGBs requires cultivating entrepreneurial ecosystems, and ANDE is dedicated to doing just that by building a thriving network of people and organizations and supporting them through policy and program initiatives. We cannot do this without the active support of our partners across the region and are very grateful to them. Partners whose logos you will see throughout these 3 days, and many, many more who continue to support us every day in our work. Once again, a very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for making the time to be here. We look forward to your active participation and feedback over the next 3 days.
Great. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. This is going to be the session on where does South Asia stand in the race to 2030, the role of cities as units of climate action. Cities, often referred to as the engines of economic growth and innovation, are now finding themselves at the forefront of that battle against climate change. And today we have this stellar panel of speakers from C40 who are going to be talking to us about the wonderful work that they're doing, specifically strengthening capacities of cities across the region in what we're talking about, the role that cities are playing to fight climate change. So with no further ado, I will be handing it over to Shruti Narayan, who is the Regional Director, South and West Asia for C40, to take us briefly through the work that the organization is doing in the region. Shruti, over to you.
Thank you so much, and good morning to everyone, or good afternoon or good evening from wherever you're joining. And we're very, very excited to be on this panel today, and with such a stellar lineup of all women that have been working towards accelerating climate action. So moving to the next slide. So just as an agenda, so we've basically, as for the spotlight that we have, today on C40, we decided that we're going to give, the participants in sort of a preview of what C40 does. So we thought we will start with an introduction and overview of C40, who we are, what we do, and what drives us to deliver what we do, and how we measure accountability of our cities while driving and pushing them to innovation and delivery on ground. That's really, really important for us. So the first section, we are going to be covering that along with my colleague Sanjana, who I'm going to hand over to her after I introduce the agenda, and then we'll open it up for questions, to sort of get any feedback on that. We're going to then jump into the approach to solid-based and inclusive climate action, because we really believe that it's important for us to pick up sectorally areas that are critical for the region, the cities, and focus on them. And ensuring that we are inclusive and leaving no one behind is very, very important for us. And we're going to use the approach that we have adopted in this particular sector, which my colleagues Deepti and Akshita are going to walk us through, and they will introduce themselves as well. And then we're going to open it again for maybe questions, and then we're going to jump into the last sort of section of presentation that we have, which is an approach to freight electrification in India. But we're also going to cover and outline aspects of Latin America. This program also is sort of extended over Latin America as well. So I'm going to actually request maybe the C40 team to introduce themselves now, and then we'll jump into the discussion. So I'm going to hand it to Sanjana, and then the rest of my colleagues to introduce themselves. Sanjana.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Sanjana, and I'm the Regional Officer for South and West Asia at C40. And I'm happy to be here today. And I'm based in Bangalore, India. Yeah, I will pass it on now to my colleague, Akshita.
Thanks, Sanjana, and hello, everybody. My name is Akshita, and I work as the Inclusive Climate Action City Advisor for Bangalore, and I'm based out of Bangalore as well. Deepti, over to you. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Dipti Salvi. I'm working as Senior Manager Waste and Methane, and I'm based out of Mumbai. Happy to be here and joining this event. Ananta?
Hi everyone, I'm Ananta Paladugula. I'm the head of Mobility India at C40 Cities, and I'm currently handling the freight decarbonization work at C40 Cities.
Thank you. And with that, I request Cypria, if you can move to the next slide. So, why do cities matter? And I think we saw in the video that we, in South Asia, are in one of the most vulnerable regions with respect to climate change. And we're seeing a rapid growth of, cities. Now, just in some perspectives, cities occupy 2% of the world's landmass. So not a major, percentage, but they host more than 50% of the world's population, and also are one of the key. And why do they host this population is because they generate 80% of the world's GDP, being key economic drivers, and people are attracted to cities for work, infrastructure. So cities are important, and we are in a region where cities are going to be coming, I think we're looking at almost 18 new cities getting added every year, mega cities getting added every year in this region. Next slide. And, why are these statistics important for us? Cities end up consuming 75% of the world's energy. So imagine with just 2% of the world landmass, cities are consuming 75% of the world's energy. They are generating over 70% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions, and are also cities in 2% of the landmass that they occupy have exposure of 80% of the vulnerability exposure is in cities. And they're increasingly affected by heat waves, storms, drought, flooding, and sea level rise. We all here have been probably impacted with some kind of climate change exposure that either we are aware of or we're assuming that it's not that, but it's here. So climate change is here and it's locked in. There was a prediction, there was a scientific analysis that was done recently, which said that this year that we're seeing, which has been probably the hottest year till date, is going to be the coolest year in the next 20 years. So in statistics, it's important to understand what we are facing and what we're going to face and how we need to accelerate action. Next slide. So we also believe that cities are where the solutions lie. Cities are diverse and innovative. They have many people who come together of different age groups, different backgrounds, that can really work together in finding solutions. They're nimble and progressive. We have seen cities taking progressive action on climate change, and they move faster than subnational governments and national governments. So climate action can really be accelerated in cities. They're also financial and economic hubs. And, working with the Aspen network, which is supporting entrepreneurs, we realized that, climate change has to be looked at from bringing together an ecosystem of stakeholders, of which a very, very important part is supporting entrepreneurs. It is going to be technologies and solutions that are going to solve the problem for us of climate change. And we are very, very excited to be on this panel today. And, we really think cities are led by dynamic leaders. We will give an introduction to C40, but C40, we work across cities with leaders, and we've seen that they take commitments on climate action, faster and more ambitious than states or national governments. We have seen through COVID-19 that how, through working with C40, we really worked with cities in exploring how we can quickly and urgently respond to COVID, which was just a symptomatic of what kind of, public health outbreaks we can experience due to climate change. So it's important to see how those public health hazards are addressed and looked at, and cities become, a significant center for handling that. And we see the solutions lie in green buildings, looking at reliable water supply, renewable energy, looking at how we can shift mobility, how we can manage our waste, in ensuring that all of these solutions that we are structuring are inclusive, address the vulnerable, and also lead to job creation and better health. Next slide, Cypria. So what is C40? Based on this context, we realized that cities are going to be where we're going to see accelerated climate action. C40 is a unique network that is for cities and by cities. We have nearly 100 world-leading megacities that have come together and signed up to being a part of C40. We are across 7 regions. We represent 20% of the global economy that is directly representing and working with 582 million residents, and also indirectly impacting and influencing 896 million people living and working in the wider city. And this statistic is very important because we really believe that our work can influence and leverage metropolitan areas that go beyond the city boundaries, but also impact people who are coming from other parts of the regional areas to work in cities. We have also noticed this, that people, this is also something that is a representation of the economic barrier. A lot of times people who are not in a certain economic index tend to live in the outskirts of the city. So how do we be more inclusive when we're addressing climate action? So this is C40, we are across the world and we work with cities. Next slide. So, as the region that we're representing today as a team, we have about 11 cities that are members of South and West Asia, which includes Ahmedabad, Amman, Bangalore, Chennai, Delhi, Dhaka, North and South, because there are 2 municipalities, Dubai, Karachi, Kolkata, and Mumbai. And, again, not outlining, again, the video that was presented earlier really outlined the risks and how vulnerable this area is. And also, how this area is probably one of the youngest, regions in the world. So, a lot of young population. So all of these factors make it a very interesting region for us to work in, increased vulnerability to climate, increasing cities, growing urbanization, and also perhaps the youngest area. So how do you manage this? How do you manage economic development with respect to the urbanization? And how do you look at capturing and harnessing the youth in creating jobs and looking at economic recovery? Next slide. So this is just giving you an overview of, the climate action plans. We are focused on India right now, but I know that so C40 really focuses on data-driven climate action plans as a basis to developing, what kind of actions and commitments the city needs to take. We have a climate action planning framework that we apply and use globally that balances mitigation and adaptation and is very evidence-based. We ensure and we recommend cities to take the journey in committing to ambitious targets that are backed by data and that have pathways to reduction. In India, we've been working with all our cities to develop a climate action plan. And we are very, very happy that recently we've had, Bangalore was the most recent, city that launched its climate action plan, being the 3rd city in India. But we had Mumbai and Chennai that have already launched their climate action plan. In addition to these cities, we are also currently working with Dhaka North and South, and they are in advanced stages of their climate action plan. We're targeting a launch in February for Dhaka North and South. And we have just kicked off the climate action plan in Karachi with the support of the UNDP. And we're really looking at how we can, leverage and support Karachi on also delivering its climate action plan. Another key aspect that I want to outline here is that we really like to use our climate action plans to leverage and inspire other cities. While we want to maintain a group of cities that have committed to very ambitious climate action, we also want to use this platform to inspire other non-C40 cities. We work across the globe, and especially in this region with other cities. We use the lessons that we have learned in our C40 cities to inspire them to take action. We provide support, we do capacity building, and we also encourage them to take part in our networks and sign up to our accelerator commitments, which my colleague Sanjana is going to cover. Next slide. So what do we do? What do we do at C40? So we are driving a green and just recovery, and we are really committed to supporting the cities to reducing their emissions by half by 2030, which if you look at it is only 5 years away. We do not have a very long window, but we really want to ensure that cities have a measurable action plan. We do this by raising climate ambition, by the plans that we highlighted. We also encourage our cities to sign up to high impact accelerators or declarations. And I know my colleague Sanjana will cover, but in this region, we have cities that have signed up to air quality declaration, urban nature declarations, that is highlighting the needs of the city. It's also one of the most polluted cities from air pollution, where we are really, apparently reducing our lifespan by almost nearly 10 years, breathing this air. So we're really working and encouraging cities to sign up to our air quality accelerators. And we have cities that have signed up, like Amman has, Bangalore has, and Delhi has signed up to our air quality declaration. We're also working on cities to sign up to the urban nature declaration, balancing blue and green infrastructure. And then we want to ensure that the raising of climate ambition is built on equitable and thriving communities. We really believe that we cannot deliver climate action without ensuring everybody is on the table while we're developing a plan or an action plan, and also when we're delivering our actions on the ground. And my colleagues in their subsequent slides will also highlight on some pilot projects that we're undertaking. We also think that cities can really build a global diplomacy movement. We bring the voice of the city on almost all global platforms, like we're organizing, we're co-hosting the local city action summit at COP this year, where we're aiming to bring almost 100 cities to come together and discuss climate action and how they can align with the national governments. We also organized a climate summit for cities at the New York Climate Week, with the UN Secretary General, where we were able to bring the voice of the cities on the table and their issues and how those can be addressed in collaboration and partnership. We really believe that cities need to learn from each other, and that's a strength of C40. We believe that there is no need to reinvent the window, and we organize a lot of technical peer-to-peer exchanges. We have several networks that cities join in based on the priorities they have. Like we have Amman that's joined the Sustainable Transport Network. We have Karachi that's been working on the water network to understand what are the aspects that they can learn from. And then last but not the least, we really believe that it's important for us to link up this work with financing. We recognize that cities need finance. Even if they are credit worthy, they need to structure projects. C40 has a global program called the Cities Finance Facility that supports cities to develop projects that can be then taken for financing. It's a project preparation facility that we've been running for a very long time. And currently, cities apply and then they get selected based on the stage of the project. This cycle in our region, we have Mumbai that's working on a deployment of renewable energy for its electrification of its bus fleet. And we're also looking at that project to support the other cities in South Asia to learn from that. We also work on other financial instruments like climate bonds, etc. But one of the things that we've been really focusing on is looking at climate budgeting. C40 launched the first global pilot on climate budgeting, which included 12 cities globally that worked along with Oslo. That was the first city in the world to have fully integrated climate budgeting as a part of its municipal finances, which ensures that the lens of every single decision that the city makes is through climate. And that is the paradigm shift we need. We're not at a time when we can look at climate separately. We're at a time when each one of us and every city, has to look at climate with every decision. It's a paradigm shift that we need where the lens shifts to climate completely. Next slide. And this is an overview of our sectors and networks. We have, these are the networks that the cities can join. We have 5 sectors that we focus on currently. Transport and urban planning. Actually, recently we've split them into 2. So now we may be 6 sectors. So we have a sector that focuses on transport and urban planning, because we also realize that our climate action plans need to be integrated and mainstreamed into long-term economic planning and master planning for effective delivery on ground and institutionalization. We have a very critical and strong focus on adaptation and resilience, and which is very, very, sort of applicable to this region in specific. We also have been working on food in addition to waste, because we recognize that a significant percentage of emissions of methane come from food, and often that area is neglected or not addressed when climate discussions are happening. Energy and building one is a typical one that we come for. And the last one that we discussed already was air quality. Next slide. And with this, I'm going to actually hand it to my colleague Sanjana, and she's going to walk us through C40's leadership standards. Sanjana, over to you.
Hi. Thank you, Shruti. And I think, Shruti has given this context of what C40 does, and C40's leadership standards are kind of the mechanism through which C40 does it, like it is how they go about executing this. So the most distinguishing feature of C40 is that it operates on performance-based requirements that we term as leadership standards rather than membership fees. And they are the minimum requirements that ensure that the C40 networks of cities are leading in terms of climate action. And we are, working on planning, delivering, mainstreaming, innovation, and leading in terms of 2021 to 2024. And this is also a way in which C40, decides how they can incentivize cities to continue to lead and also track the progress on a yearly basis. And, when cities do adhere to these standards, they remain active in the network. And, if, they don't perform as well, we sort of provide different kinds of support. And, we are very, rigorous in terms of the leadership standards. And in case cities are not able to meet these standards, they do sort of move out of the network as well. Next slide. So kind of going over the 5 leadership standards. The first one is plan. And as Shruti mentioned, C40 has a climate action planning framework that is evidence-based, data-driven, and inclusive, and aligns with the 1.5 degrees Celsius ambition of the Paris Agreement. And, the cities in our region, as you know, Mumbai has sort of led in South Asia, being the first city to have a 1.5 aligned cap. And recently we have Chennai and Bengaluru as well joining the network. Apart from just the planning, so we don't ensure that the plan just remains as a plan. We also look at how cities are actually working to deliver within the powers and jurisdictions that the city has to deliver the commitments based on the cap, and how are they actually keeping resilience and equity in mind while delivering this. And we, as Shruti mentioned, we have different kind of accelerators that cities sign on to, which are the highest level of commitment that a city can take in terms of a certain focus area that is important to the city. For example, we have Urban Nature Accelerator, which kind of city is looking at a certain target of maintaining 30 to 40% of the city as a green space, and is ensuring that there is a blue or a green space within 15 minutes walk for every city resident. And so that is kind of the goal of ensuring the green spaces are also widely distributed amongst the city. Like this, we also have the Air Quality Accelerator and several other sort of highest level commitments. And I think these 2 are the most important for our region. If you move to the next slide. We have mainstreaming, which is, again, how do, as Shruti mentioned, the term paradigm shift, how does climate not remain in silos or remain in one particular area, but rather how is climate actually integrated and embedded into the city governance and decision-making processes? So this can be either through financial means, with the climate budget, or with other tools such as master planning. How is the city actually taking these climate commitments and actually embedding them in the day-to-day governance? So we have the climate budgeting pilot, which Shruti spoke about, where how each of the climate action recommendations that come out of the climate action planning process, how are these actually, given these kind of measurable budgets and tangible ways of measuring that action, and how are they incorporated into the ordinary budgeting process? And, along with several other cities. We have, Barcelona, London. We also have some global South cities, including Swane and, most recently Mumbai as well, who is considering taking up climate budgeting. And then we also have the urban planning sector or work area of C40, which looks at how do cities, plan their cities, how do city governments plan their cities while keeping in mind sustainable and equitable growth. We have several networks, including the land use planning network, the green and thriving neighborhood networks, the 15-minute city networks that C40 cities are undertaking to match their CAP goals with city planning. Something very interesting happening in Chennai is that they have sort of partnered with us and World Bank, the Chennai Metropolitan Development Authority, or CMDA, on how they can integrate the CAP actions into the city's upcoming master plan. Next slide. The next leadership standards is on innovation. So how are our cities, broadly, what kind of innovative actions are they taking? And here we track two main things that our cities are doing. One is, is there any kind of emerging climate solution that the city is investing its resources in researching or developing different pilots in? Or is cities taking certain, certain emerging climate solutions that have been piloted before, but how are they upscaling it? How are they making it a large, like upscaling that kind of project? So that is innovation leadership standard. And then the other section of this is how our cities influencing other sectors. So the government itself is responsible for only a certain portion of the emissions, but it's often the private sector and residential sectors that are responsible for emissions. So how are cities actually influencing and incentivizing these segments of the population in reducing demand or influencing consumption patterns and reducing consumption emissions? For example, how is cities incentivizing more sustainable waste, collection and processing, and how are cities influencing, adoption of more green buildings or energy efficient lighting, for example. So in the next sort of slide, if you can go to the next slide. Yeah, the leadership standard 4, we have a few innovative examples from global South cities that I've decided to highlight. We have Freetown, which is the capital of Sierra Leone, which has quite an interesting initiative that they have launched recently, which is called Freetown the Tree Town. So what cities, it's kind of a perfect blend of community stewardship of nature and digital innovation. So each tree can be tagged, so each person can grow trees in areas that they might have or in community areas. And each tree is tagged and assigned impact tokens based on the person sort of caretaking it. And these impact tokens can be bought and sold and traded for carbon offsets, providing economic incentives to people to really sort of maintain the trees and grow new trees in the area. This has created jobs for women and young people, and also provided people economic, like job and livelihoods away from damaging industries like mining. Recently in Chennai as well, the Tamil Nadu government has created something quite innovative, which is the Tamil Nadu Green Climate Company, which has a mission to work on 3 core areas, which is wetlands, greening, and climate change. It currently has an equity of 5 crore from the state government, but it also can accept grants from any source, national and internationally. And they are also working to develop a green climate fund, which can also mobilize funding from even non-profit agencies soon. So essentially, this is a sort of vehicle that can sort of work harmoniously across sectors and collaborate with private, non-profit, as well as government sectors to really champion and mainstream the cause of climate. The last leadership standard is how do cities become leaders of climate. As Shruti kind of outlined, we believe mayors and city leaders can be advocates and global leaders, really pushing the needle in terms of climate action. And here we have a couple of photos that I wanted to just showcase with you. This is in the first photo on the left-hand side is Ahmedabad city, which is at the Urban 20 conference, which happened earlier this year. As part of the G20 cycle, there is a official engagement group called the Urban 20 that Ahmedabad was the chair of. And we have the Ahmedabad mayor in the center with the commissioner and the deputy commissioner on his sides. And yeah, so they really highlighted different initiatives that Ahmedabad had taken on climate, as well as facilitated discussions amongst cities on how they can, focus on climate finance, increase their water security and urban resilience. We also have in the center, Mumbai Commissioner on the left-hand side, Iqbal Singh Chahal, and he is at the New York Climate Week, and he is speaking about lane shift. And I do believe Ananta will cover that shortly. And the last is Dhaka North Mayor, who's receiving an award from the chair of C40, Mayor Sadiq Khan. Also wanted to highlight that Dhaka North is currently the co-chair of C40 as well. So with this, yeah, I think these are overall the current sort of leadership standards that we have. I will pass it to Shruti, or I will also pass it in case there are any questions. Yeah.
Yeah, just jumping in here. I think there are a few questions, Shruti, that you've already addressed, and I would encourage participants to take a look at the Q&A tab because there are questions being addressed there live as we're speaking. I think there's one question that is still open, which is how much do you see city action influencing national climate policy or work being done by the national governments? In your work, are there any examples that you could maybe be sharing? Shruti, Sanjana, anything to add there?
So I mean, the way we look at this is that cities are able to influence national governments by action. For example, globally, and we've seen in this region that cities have committed to a climate action plan through the climate action plan targets that are helping them bring down their greenhouse gas emissions nearly, by 50% by 2030 and almost reaching net zero by 2050. And, this is a way to influence the national government on what kind of policies and changes are required to bring that shift, right? What is needed. And we always work very closely, especially in this region, as everyone who's joined us knows that we really need to have a close collaboration with the sub-national government and the national government in this region to deliver change. And all our climate action plans, bring them on the table, and through our projects that my colleagues, Ananta and Dipti and Akshata will highlight that how we look at these projects as a way to engage the national government. And specifically for the project that Ananta will highlight, we've been working with Niti Aayog, several ministries to bring about that change. So it's a continuous dialogue that we have. And Sanjana wants to add something.
Yeah, I think also highlighting recently the Urban 20, where G20 was, the G20 leaders, like the Sherpa of the G20 was, present at the Urban 20, and really the push for climate finance often came from cities. That has been incorporated into the G20 agenda as well, that countries have sort of, and the Sherpa himself highlighted the importance of cities and city climate, like cities in leading the action on climate. And, I think some of that is reflected in the G20 communique as well. So, how like cities have been pushing for this kind of action for a long time. And I think there is some recognition also from national governments of that. Yeah, that's it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Just giving it a couple of seconds to see if there are any more questions that are coming in. As of now, we've addressed the questions from the participants. Would encourage you to take a look there, because Shruti has called out how organizations can reach out if they are in alignment with the mandate that C40 is working with across the regions that they've been supporting, all the cities you've already seen on the slides as well. And also how we're integrating the role of private sector, which plays a key role again in this sort of fight to climate change from the city lens as well. So please do take a look. We will send across this compiled post-event as well. All right, great. I don't see any other questions. So I think with this, we can move on to the second part of the presentation. And Nanya, if you can change the slide, please. Yes. Over to Deepti. I think we'll let you sort of take it.
Thank you, Saipriya. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Sanjana and Shruti, for giving a great introduction about the work done by C40. And so I'm, as I have introduced myself, I'm working as a senior manager in waste and methane area for the city of Mumbai. And I'll be taking you all through the program that is been conducted in the C40 through C40 in Mumbai and also in Ahmedabad. And it is the waste and methane program, mainly focusing about the reduction of methane emissions from the waste sector. So, yeah, next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So as you all can see, waste is major source of GHG emissions, and the globally it has been seen that 3% is the overall contribution of the waste sector, and in India it's 3.7%, and in Mumbai, because I'm working in Mumbai, so I'll be more likely speaking more about Mumbai. So 8% is the overall emissions for Mumbai. Now, if we compare these emissions at different regional scale, we can see that Mumbai, as per the Mumbai Climate Action Plan, it's 8%. This is 8% is entirely methane. And while this might look small in comparison to other sectors at first glance, we need to understand the type of emissions from the waste and its impact before we can conclude that. So these results have been taken with reference to IPCC report and CAP, which is the Mumbai Climate Action Plan report. Next slide. Yeah. So in this, there is the trend of the various sectors and their emissions have been given throughout the years, I would say so, and how it has been grown in, I would say 2 decades, 3 decade differences that we can see it here. And emission from the waste sector witnessed highest growth of 224% over the period of 1994 to 2016 in India. Now, the major concern is that these emissions from the waste sector, though have been increased, that this transition of increase of emission have been periodically increased over and over and over the years. So it is very crucial for everybody to understand that apart from other sectors like the industries and energy and building sector and agriculture, etc., waste indirectly or directly is showing that trend that it is kind of creating a lot of nuisance to the cities. I mean, with respect to making sure their emissions should be within the limits and other things. So it is very crucial to manage the SWM of the city, the solid waste management of the city, to make sure that emissions, at least from that sector emissions, have been managed successfully. Next slide. Yeah, so now we are, as we all probably know, that there is a interrelationship between the waste and the climate, and we all know that methane is the second most important GHG gas, which is kind of creating all the concerns for any city to be afraid of with the years coming. And it is the I would say the gas which has the I would say the capacity of 28 times as potent as carbon dioxide, because it traps heat in the atmosphere. This further leads to heat island effect in many of the cities. So Mumbai is also facing that issues. So with the time, it has been seen the trends that the temperature in the city has been increased a lot, and further these things are having directly or indirectly linkages with the other aspects of the city as well. Next slide. Okay, so here it is kind of an important to understand that what type of emission it is responsible, to create more on the climate aspects, which are creating more heat concerns for the city. So waste sector primarily emission composition is methane, and so practically for Mumbai, most of its waste sector emission are in the form of methane emissions. And the city of Mumbai has dump sites, though they are kind of managing their waste with various types of treatments, and they have proposed various systems of waste management, but there are dump sites which are presently where the waste is currently dumped, and with the help of informal sector or through some other I would say the treatment facilities, they have it. So through that, they are trying to manage it. But the amount of waste which is coming or generated within the city, it is almost like 7,200 tons per day. So you can imagine the quantum of waste which is being generated and the capacity of the treatment they have it at present. And of course, one should not forget that Mumbai is having very less land available because it's an island city. So they don't have that freedom or liberty to extend their sites of treatment facilities to some other locations, and because it will be create further transportation issues and further managing of the SWM. Next slide. Yeah. So here we are kind of getting an understanding about the program overview, which the C40 is working on with Mumbai and Ahmedabad city. And transforming organic waste management in the city is the need of our, I would say so. So guided by the hierarchy of waste management, this program is aligned with the global good practices and strategic recommendations. So we are focusing to give the city that understanding and that liberty that they can have good management of waste, where they would be improving and strengthening, enhancing and diverting. And further, the target is to avoid and reduce methane emissions. So we all know that the methane emissions are from the wet waste or the organic waste. So diverting that organic waste so that it is not ending in the landfill site, and making utter use of it by providing different types of treatments. I mean, it could be any kind of treatment which the city feels comfortable with, but of course, how we can enhance and efficiently manage that system. So overall goal, as I said, is to avoid or reduce the methane emissions, and that can be only achieved if we divert the organic waste going in the landfill. Next slide. Okay, so these are the more or less the documents and the reports based on which the program foundation is based upon. My colleague earlier also explained that how the Paris Agreement have supported to various and have become the base for developing the climate action plan for various cities globally. And Mumbai is also having the same base on which the Mumbai climate action plan was prepared in the year 2022. Next slide. Okay, so coming to the program objectives. So overall objective, as I said, is to improve the organic waste management in the city. So how we can work to reach to that goal or the objectives is first is reduction of food waste, then universal collection and source segregation. So these three aspects form the foundation of this overall strategy that will further lead to large-scale organic treatment plants and the SLF for making proper utilization and trapping of the gases. So the landfills are also sources of methane emissions, and we all many have times seen and heard the news of fire at the landfills and such kind of places where the waste has been dumped openly. And that's the reason, like, if we kind of make sure the city are making the strategies in such a way that the reduction of waste is being catered to, and the citizens are well aware about the need of an hour, how we can manage those waste, and there has to be collaborative efforts with all the stakeholders involved in managing the solid waste management in that particular city. The blue ticked items, if you see at the bottom of the slide, are database. So what we need to do for all these activities to achieve those activities is like to have a good set of data. It has to be accurate. Also, at the same time, it has to be approachable. I'm saying approachable in the sense that citizens should be aware that what level of waste they have been generating, how their lifestyle is going to affect the trends, and how they, at the end, they are getting the outcomes if they are not managing the waste properly. Then the budget analysis, since SWM sector as most of the times, many of the cities or the towns face the concern that they don't have enough budget to make sure all the components of SWMs are managed, and right from the collection till the treatment and disposal. So how we can figure it out, all those things, and along with that, making sure that whatever, I mean, the segregation part for the sake of it. So how important is to invest in the segregation part, so that at the source itself, the waste is being segregated and you don't have to waste, I mean, not exactly waste, but invest the money in treatment or disposal sites. So it is very crucial for the cities to understand that just to build treatment plants and just to build SLFs is not the entirely the whole objective of managing the SWM or the solid waste generated within the city. It is very crucial for the cities to understand that they have to manage the first entry point of the SWM system so that the later part can be taken care of. Again, the universal collection system, so everybody is well aware about it. Then the organic procurement strategy. So depending upon the geographical location, the dynamics at the city level or the city municipal corporation level, one needs to understand that how those procurement strategies can be worked out. So here the procurement means how we can capture the organic waste from various generators. It could be the households, it could be the bulk waste generators, it could be any other sources of waste where the organic waste is being generated. So how we can capture it and how we can route it in such a way that it is efficiently managed and with less intensive, I mean, I would say transportation wise, it is less intensive and it can be reached. So the option of decentralized waste management many at times is preferred depending upon the city's profile. But many of the cities, if they don't have that kind of liberty to have decentralized, they can of course go for the centralized system. Then as I have discussed the decentralized treatment and community engagement, the green ones are the kind of the after impact that can be reached once we get the blue items ticked. Next slide. Okay, here we can understand that the program has been designed to accelerate actions and projects that improve organic waste management in supporting cities by taking strategic targets, and for reaching to that objectives, as I said, it is improving the data availability. We have to understand the local conditions assessment. Then we have to also find out, based on those studies, we have to understand what kind of opportunities. So we have to understand their existing plans. We have to understand what kind of projects they have proposed and what other stakeholders are also facing the challenges in catering to this SWM aspects. So again, it is very crucial that whenever we are doing such kind of exercises, it's necessary to involve various stakeholders to understand what are different dynamics can work well with the city to manage the organic waste. And after that, we will be preparing the project preparation with the due diligence aspect. So it will be consisting of site assessment, feedstock sourcing, finance engineering, and pilot implementation. Next. Here, this slide basically gives a kind of brief outlook that how this program is been divided into. So it's the first is inception, second is the data validation, third is project preparation, and the fourth is project implementation. At present for City of Mumbai, we are at the inception stage. Here we are we just had last week the kickoff workshop for the City of Mumbai, where we made a consensus with the city that what kind of challenges they are facing, what kind of issues they are concerned in respect to organic waste management, and what level of support or what are the crucial areas they are looking for C40. And based on that, we are right now at the stage of opportunity mapping. And further after that, we would be also in the data validation stage and the later stages of project implementation. So giving I would say a simpler version of this slide is like, we are working out with a kind of concept and an action plan. I would also call it as an implementation plan, which can be considered as a pilot initiative, and how that same initiative can be further scaled up at the city level. So one needs to understand that it is just not that you can directly work and make sure that every part of the city is catered to and it is well managed at the same time. We have to go in pockets, small areas, small regions of the city, and need to understand how every ward works out. So it could be a thing that we have to group few wards which are on the similar sense of status of SWM management, and we have to group them and make sure how things can work out well, and then further go with the scaling of that program. Next slide. So at the end, I would say so that the final indicators that we need to achieve for any city, and for that matter for Mumbai and Ahmedabad as well, is to have a cleaner, healthier, resilient and inclusive city. And this is consisting of the collaborative, and this will consist of collaborative efforts from the city officials, from the stakeholders, from the agencies and the contractors which are currently working with the city. So there is a lot of contribution, there is a lot of variety that we need to play with in order to come up with a strong strategy, so that the city is managing the waste in a focusing the organic waste again in a more efficient and effective manner. Next slide. Again, the C40 pathway towards zero waste is a city-level strategy that supports global South cities to improve the waste management practices and reduce waste and GHG emissions. And as you can see, there are a few cities mentioned which are also part of the C40's pathway towards zero waste accelerator. So this is one of this accelerator which C40 has it, and many cities have signed this accelerator to kind of commit that they would be working towards achieving those targets as mentioned, which are like providing timely citywide waste collection services, treating at least 30% of organic waste, and reducing waste disposal emissions by at least 30% by 2030. And it will get it is definitely going to make a larger impact for the cities. Next slide.
Deepti, if I may just jump in, just giving a time check because we're at time
Sure.
to be able to hear from the others as well. Just to flag that we will be sharing the slides with the participants, so that if there's any piece that does not get covered, please do ask your questions so we can get to it in Q&A, and as well as share the slides across. But Deepti, I think at this point, if we can sort of hand over to the next presenter, would that be okay?
Just 2 slides more that will
Sure.
give a context. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So here I'm just quickly going through the Mumbai Climate Action Plan key sectors, and we are focusing. Next slide. So here we are focusing about the sustainable waste management, a sector which they have targeted in the MCAP, and the areas focused were reducing landfill waste, decentralized waste management, and scientific management of landfill. Next slide. And under that, there have been a lot of short-term, long-term, and medium-term goals which have been targeted through the MCAP, and we would be also getting aligned with the MCAP these targets, so that those kind of commitments with the city have mentioned are also at par with the timeline, and our goal of managing the organic waste is also fulfilled. So as you can see, under the reduced landfill, we have focused about the source reduction and reuse in the most preferred way. In the decentralized waste management, setting up decentralized infrastructure depends upon the areas and how we can work out very well, and recycling options that can be considered. And then the remediation of scientific landfill, it is like landfill is the least preferred mode of managing SWM, as we all know. But at present, since Mumbai has its own dump site, so they are focusing about biomining and how we can make sure that the inerts are only going in the SLF and how we can support. So those kind of targets have been mentioned in the MCAP. Next slide. Yeah, you can skip this. I mean, it's not necessary. Yeah. So as I said, that how we are going to collaboratively utilizing these aspects in our program as well, to make sure the city is reaching the goal of the targets they have committed in the MCAP, and simultaneously we would be reaching our goal of this program, that is reduction of methane. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Thank you so much, Deepti. I think if we can now hand it over to Ananta, who will walk us through, or will it be Akshata? Just checking, because there are a couple of slides that speak to Bangalore's action plan as well.
Yeah, it's going to be me, Akshata.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, great. Over to you, Akshata.
thank you. And
Okay.
next slide. Yeah, we can start. Yeah. Once again, thank you, Deepti, and also thank you all for joining us today. A brief background about C40's Inclusive Climate Action Program. We aim to ensure that the benefits of transformative climate actions are shared equitably by placing people at the heart of all urban decision making, while creating fair, just, and thriving societies for all. Globally, we have about 53 inclusive climate action program cities. This includes the Global Green New Deal pilot cities, the Green Job and Just Transition cities, Women for Climate, ICA Forum, ICA Fund cities, amongst others. We provide direct assistance and peer learning and global thought and leadership opportunities to our cities, along with mainstreaming inclusive climate opportunities. For your reference, soon after my presentation, I will share a link to the ICA programs and its various interventions. Next slide. Without getting too much into the programmatic details, the Global Green New Deal project is implemented in 2 phases. The first phase had 9 cities and the second phase has about 12 cities. Just so all of you know, the first phase cities have all now scaled up to national and regional level work within the ICA program. Next slide. Now coming to the region, Bangalore became the first GGND pilot city in South and West Asia. The local municipality identified inclusion issues in solid waste management sector, specifically focusing on bulk waste generators for this pilot program. Some of the key outcomes are targeted here, but we are working with various stakeholders as part of this pilot. Next slide. So most recently, we have conducted detailed baseline assessment study looking at many challenges and opportunities within the bulk waste generator ecosystem. This was mainly to understand the participatory approaches that is currently in existence, what can be improved, and what can be strengthened further. Next slide. So for the study, along with the city, we identified 5 different baseline study objectives. We, of course, started with looking at a comprehensive stakeholder map for this zone. We are working in one zone, and I'll talk more about it. Then we went on to identify gaps and barriers in the existing processes. This was done by one, reviewing a lot of existing policies and bylaws in place, but also as part of the stakeholder engagements and consultations. We have also, with the stakeholders, identified many workplace intervention activities like training and upskilling as part of the next phase. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief timeline and overview of what has happened so far. What started was with a baseline development and looking at identifying different equity and equitable opportunities, more in terms of literature review and desk-based studies. This was followed by conducting intensive stakeholder workshops and other engagements. We also have mapped bulk waste generators across 5 wards in Bangalore as part of this exercise. And we are now in the final stage where we're just about preparing and submitting the baseline assessment report to the city officials. Next slide. This is just to give an overview of the kind of mapping activities that has been undertaken. We worked in what is known as the Bommanahalli zone in Bangalore. And we identified 5 wards where we wanted to map different bulk waste generators. I will not go into the technicalities of what a bulk waste generator is, etc. But a mapping exercise was undertaken mainly to understand what is the kind of waste generated by these bulk waste generators. This is something that we wanted to bring up in discussion with the city officials. Next slide, please. This is just an example of one particular ward within the zone where we identified different bulk waste generators, and each of this has been very easily mapped and located on Google Earth using very simple tools. One of the key outcomes of this exercise is the city officials have asked us to provide training for the junior health inspectors who are contractual city staff to basically conduct this mapping exercise, as this sits under the National Swachh Sarvekshan campaign as well. Next slide, please. This is just to give an idea of how complex the bulk waste generator ecosystem is in terms of stakeholders. In one small zone in Bangalore, there were 12 different stakeholder groups, and our engagement has happened with most of them, except with the elected representatives and piggeries. Next slide, please. As part of the stakeholder engagement, one of the critical activities that we undertook was also to do the vulnerability assessment of all the groups involved, along with the power influence mapping to see who would be the best for us to approach. These are just some of the activities as part of the stakeholder consultations that we've done. We've interacted with housekeeping staff of multiple bulk generators. This included commercial, institutional, and housekeeping staff from residential bulk waste generators like our apartment complexes. I just want to share here that this was the first time many of our stakeholders who work at the front line were part of bulk waste generator stakeholder consultations. So this was a pretty important milestone for the city. Next slide, please. Again, here we have looked at both the contractual city waste workers and also the non-contractual, more informal waste workers, but they're both critical to the waste collection work and are both part of the frontline communities. Next slide. These are just some of the findings, and again, I will not go too much into detail, but something that's mainly stood up is the need for training and capacity building across multiple stakeholder groups. There were specific requests for information, education, and communication material. So that was something else that came up. We have identified at least 10 different training modules as part of this exercise, on which we will start working as part of the implementation. Next slide. So yes, so these are our 4 large areas of intervention for over the next 6 months. We will start with building capacities of the junior health workers who are part of the Brihad Bengaluru Mahanagarapalika city staff. We are also working towards improving some of the monitoring system that currently exists at BBMP, more in terms of having roles and responsibilities specifically defined for bulk waste generators, who's doing what, and so on. And we will also be advocating for social inclusion of the bulk waste generator waste collection staff. We are hopeful of having some identity cards and also uniforms that's designed and distributed for the waste collection staff in this particular zone. Then we will, of course, be working with the bulk waste generators themselves through their resident welfare associations and other elected officers, because this is the source where the waste is being generated. I just want to clarify here that we are only looking at in situ waste management as part of this exercise. Next slide. Just in terms of timeline, this is over the next couple of months. We will start with, of course, a lot of workshops and validation discussions with the city officials. We are currently already engaged with the Urban Development Department, and also we are engaging with different levels of city officials, right from the commissioner to the zonal commissioner, to the superintendent engineers, who are all part of monitoring cities' waste collection involving bulk waste generators. We will also be then preparing tailor-made training programs and different deliveries. And finally, of course, we will come into the implementation of training and advocate for the recognition of the waste sector workers as part of Bangalore's climate action plan. And yes. That's all from my side, and I'll pause here maybe for any
Sure.
questions.
I think there's one question which I know Shruti has addressed briefly as well. If you want to maybe add to it, please feel free to do so in the panel directly, where they're asking about for these projects, how do you ensure the whole value chain is being a part of the process? Policy or action plans can otherwise be a very top-down approach. I know you briefly addressed it when you were talking about the power dynamics workshop, etc., that you were doing as part of that entire sort of consultation process. So if you could maybe type in your responses, and in interest of time, I can hand it over to Ananta Paladugula to take us through the last part of the presentation. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sounds perfect. It's just that I'm not able to find the question, but let me figure that out, and I will. Yeah,
I'll ping you on chat.
great,
Ananta,
perfect.
Can you go to the slides? Thanks, Akshata and Sai Priya. I'll just provide a brief overview about the freight transport sector in India and the electric vehicle sales, trends and distribution, national, state and city level policy interventions which are happening in the electrification of the transport sector in India. And after that, I'll provide a brief overview about the lane shift program, the key barriers for medium and heavy duty freight electrification, and the approach for the freight electrification, and finally a snapshot of the lane shift program events where we have like multiple stakeholders being engaged to deliver this program. Coming to the brief overview of the freight transport sector, the logistics sector represents at least 5% of India's GDP, employing around like 22 million people. In the freight transport sector, the heavy and medium duty vehicles are responsible for most of the road transportation, and they account for almost like 76% and 21% of the freight demand. The freight demand is expected to grow 5 times by 2050, and 60% of the goods are moved by road, and they account for 95% of the emissions from the freight sector itself. And the freight vehicles, even though they contribute only like 4%, which is like a very meager percentage share of the vehicles, but they are responsible for more than 40% of the road transport sector emissions. Can we move on to the next slide? Yeah. And for decarbonization of the transport sector, transition to electric vehicles is one of the key strategies adopted to reduce the GHG emissions. And in India, the major shift has been from the three-wheelers and two-wheelers, and this segment has been dominated in the electric vehicle sale of the electric vehicle segment. And coming to the share of freight electric vehicles distribution in the total electric vehicles, it is less than 1%, which is really alarming when it has a significant share of more than 40% of the road transport emissions coming from the freight transport sector. Next slide, please. And coming to the national, state, and city level interventions, at the national level, government schemes to decarbonize the transport sector include FAME scheme for passenger vehicles and PM e-bus Seva, which has been recently launched for the public transport, and there has been a very limited focus on the freight segment. And the opportunities at the city level and the national level include the climate action plans, supporting 100% electrification of light commercial vehicles, but there has been very limited focus on the medium and the heavy duty vehicle segment, which cater to a larger share of the freight demand. And the state government commitments through EV policies for freight electrification and eFast, a national platform supporting collaborative approach for freight decarbonization. These are some of the national, state, and the city level initiatives of the policies which are happening in the freight transport segment. And next slide, please. Moving on to the Lane Shift program. Lane Shift program is an exciting new freight decarbonization technical assistance program from 2023 to 2025 to accelerate the deployment of zero-emission freight vehicles and also to set a foundation for electric freight highway between Indian cities by 2030. And the main objectives of the Lane Shift program are to address concerns around vehicle electrification and to demystify the myths of freight electrification, test and prove the feasibility of electric vehicles in India, and to galvanize political action across government levels at the city, state, and the national level, and also to influence both the industry as well as the business segments to increase both the supply and the demand side for the electric trucks and to generate investment in the sector through innovative financial models so that the freight electric vehicles also could be covered under the different financial models which are existing, and to ensure that an inclusive climate action approach is at the heart of this transition. Next slide, please. So we have done a landscape analysis and where we have identified some of the key barriers which are for the medium and heavy duty electric freight segment. In the freight transport sector, around 70 to 80% of the vehicle fleet is owned by small owners, and access to finance is a challenge, especially for the small owners. Apart from these key barriers, the major barriers include for the medium and heavy duty vehicles include economic and financial barrier, infrastructure barrier, technological and performance barrier, regulatory and policy barrier, operational barriers, and awareness and acceptance barrier. Coming to the economic and financial barrier, capital cost or the initial investment cost is almost like 3 to 4 times the ICE vehicle, which is like relatively high for small owners to procure an electric truck. And there is the risk of secondary market and the uncertainty associated with the resale. All these have been like major barriers for procurement of the electric trucks. And coming to the infrastructure, lack of charging infrastructure, inadequate energy supply, and lack of interoperability due to inconsistent charging standards and connectors. These are some of the barriers which have been acting as hurdles or challenges to the electric freight truck implementation. And coming to the technology and performance barriers, lack of electric truck models which are available in the market, and the viability of the pilots. Because most of these pilots, even though they have been done, they are more in a closed environment, and not much information is available for a variety of different stakeholders who are involved in the segment, because it's a very disaggregated segment and the ownership lies within like multiple agencies. And with the lack of information and the lack of awareness and also lack of information on the technical specifications, it is very difficult for them to make that shift. And coming to the regulatory and policy barriers, it includes like limited coordination between the national, state, and the city level. As we can see, we have some national level policies and the states have committed towards 100% zero emission vehicles for the LCV segment, but not much focus has been there for the medium and the heavy duty vehicle segments, which are the major contributors to the GHG emissions. And coming to the operational barriers, lack of skilled workforce and operational and maintenance risk are some of the barriers for freight electrification. And also awareness and acceptance barriers include resistance to change, because most of the stakeholders who are more used to using the diesel truck vehicle, there is always a resistance to change and they are unfamiliar or lack of awareness of the ownership models. These are some of the key barriers which we have identified as part of our landscape analysis. Next slide, please. So to address these barriers highlighted earlier, the freight electrification approach includes like a 4-step approach where we are looking at policy framework, demand, and asset supply and investment. The policy framework mainly focuses on supporting the policy and the business environment to support the transition to electric freight vehicles and also to support the charging infrastructure which is required, and identifying the relevant demand for electric freight vehicles from the cities, operators, or different logistic service providers is critical for the policy also to make that shift towards the electric vehicles and also to support this kind of freight electrification through proper incentives. So there is always that need for demand to be signaled from the industry players and from the different stakeholders who are involved in the freight ecosystem so that the policy shift can happen. And from the asset supply, our approach includes development of supply chain to provide competitive supply manufacturing market for the electric freight vehicles, batteries, as well as chargers. And overall, a diverse funding ecosystem is required to meet the investee needs. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, please.
Sorry, 1 second. I think there's been an issue at Ananya's end. Let me just pull it up. Give me 1 second, Ananya.
Yeah,
Please.
I'm able to see the next slide. Coming to the lane shift program goals and outcomes, we have like 4 major work streams where we are focusing on EV highway, working groups, freight academy, city engagement. As part of the EV highway, our main goal is to prove electric highways are feasible in India. And as part of this exercise, we are identifying some critical highways which could be taken up for electrification. And the expected outcome of this particular activity is a successful pilot project in the national wide for electric highway initiatives. And as part of the working groups, we have 5 different working groups where we involve like multiple stakeholders who are part of the freight ecosystem, ranging from policymakers to truck associations and different energy service providers or CPOs or charging infrastructure providers, as well as OEMs. All these are part of the working groups where we try to seek their inputs and understand some of the barriers which we have identified and as part of our landscape analysis. So the main goal is to accelerate the freight electrification and to engage with different stakeholders effectively. Coming to the next vertical, which we have is the Freight Academy, where we want to galvanize political action and influence demand and supply of the electric trucks. And this particular Freight Academy will act as a platform to different stakeholders who I'm mentioning as part of the freight ecosystem to exchange ideas, to start their pilots, or to engage and identify some of the feasible financial models which they could take up, and also to aggregate demand which could be taken up for policy implementation at the state, national, and the city level. And coming to the city engagement, we would like to influence the political action and rectification of the EV misconception and be part of the regulatory process of the city engagement part and leverage policy tools to boost up zero emission freight. Next slide, please. As part of the EV highways, we are planning to identify like critical corridors and identify infrastructure, and also do an infrastructure estimation which is required for the electric highways to support the freight transition. And this particular transition, we are also deep diving into like what will be the corridor specific impact assessment. I will not deep dive into the specifications of the key tasks. Next slide, please. So
Ananta, sorry, apologies. We are 5 minutes over time, so I will
I'll wind it up.
Wind up okay.
Coming to the to support the approach which we have finalized, and to support our key activities as part of the working groups and some of the city engagements and other critical activities which we have identified as part of the lane shift program. These are some of the technical assistance studies which we are planning to do going forward, which focuses mainly on the technology and economic analysis, EV readiness for the different cities in India, developing financial models to support the e-freight transition, and the policy framework. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. As part of our working group convenings and the other outreach activities, we have been able to engage with multiple stakeholders who are part of the freight ecosystem. And this is a snapshot of our different engagements which we had in the last few months. Handing over to you, Sai Priya. I'm done. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Ananya, maybe if you can stop sharing your screen, and I will just give me 1 second. All right, great. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's joined us today. Thank you. Huge thank you to the C40 team for that detailed walkthrough of the different work streams that you're doing and examples of projects and how you're really incorporating that climate action. Sort of what does that look like on the ground, right? There is drafting a climate action as part of a city plan is one thing, but then breaking that down into these different streams and implementing with partners is where the work really lies. So thank you, Ananta, Deepti, Akshata, Sanjana, and Shruti for walking us through this work. Thank you for already addressing all the questions that have come in. We don't see any other questions right now, but if there's anything else, please do send across. And for participants who are requesting the slides, yes, we will be consolidating the slides and sharing them post the convening in a relevant format on the ANDE website. So please give us a couple of days to get all of that across to you. With that, I want to say thank you once again. And the information to the next session, which starts at 3 o'clock, will be in your chat already. And we're expecting to see all of you there in the next session as well. And yes, thank you. Thank you, C40 team, for your time today.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Sai Priya. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.